You are listening to Creating Active Lives with me, Sarah Blytho, and my regular weekly guests, and we are all here to share the research, the science, and the strategies, as well as some of the fun, to help you to create a more active life. Hello and welcome to this episode of Creating Active Lives with me, Sarah Blytho, and my guest this week, Steve Bowen, who is the COPD rehab guy. Now, this episode is actually going to be going out in COPD Awareness Month, and I think a day after COPD Awareness Day. So it's very, very timely. Steve describes himself as a retired and generally unconcerned 68-year-old diagnosed with COPD 3 years ago. But tell us a little bit more about you, Steve.
Right. I was generally sort of going about my life throughout the pandemic. I was a smoker for 50 years, and I could count myself as quite fortunate that I can still do what I can do and manage to get to where I've got to now. I find it hard to understand. I'll never discriminate against anyone that smokes, but I find it hard to understand why people would still smoke once they've got to this stage. Obviously, you want to get back again and try and claw whatever life you've got left. But that's by the by. We moved on from smoking. We went to the pandemic. I put on bucket loads of weight. I sat around on the sofa. My wife was shielding. And then it came along. I went to go and pick my grandson up from preschool. And it's about a 15, 20-minute walk away. I didn't particularly rush or anything like that. When I got there, I was still feeling a bit unwell. And he was about 3 years old, and we walked back. And as I got down the road, I had to keep taking breaks where I was getting short of breath. And he said, "You all right, Grandad?" And I says, "Yes." And we sort of walked along. He's quite a level-headed wee lad, even for his age. And after a couple of stops, I got just round the corner, 5 minutes away from where I lived, and my head started pounding, and I really couldn't get a breath. I honestly thought it was time for me to go. And
Oh, wow.
My concern wasn't for me; it was for my grandson. Obviously, he's only 3, and I'm the main parent with him, or the main guardian. So I sat down on the wall, and my wife's chiropodist lived nearby, and she was reversing her new car on the driveway. And she saw me sit down on the wall and knowing what I'm like, thought I was taking the mickey out of her trying to reverse her new car on the driveway, and sort of sat there waiting for me to make some gesture or some remark, and then realised that I was in some kind of distress myself. As I really, despite I was a first aider at work, and I know everything that you're supposed to do. I know that you've got to stay calm, not panic, try and control your breathing, absolutely everything else. I did all of that in spades. Nothing worked. I really couldn't get a breath.
Wow.
And it's the scariest thing I've ever had in my life. She saw me, and when she came across, realised I was in distress. She phoned 999 for an ambulance, and they promptly told her it would take about 2 hours.
Gosh, 2 hours?
Yeah. And then I really thought my number was up. I really thought it was time for me to go. Lucky enough, my grandson wasn't fazed at all. He could see that what was happening to me, we didn't get stressed out or anything, and they took us in. I sat down, and they offered me a chair to recline and everything else. I said, I can't recline, so I sort of crouched my knees up and sat on the floor in their front room of the chiropodist's house. And slowly but surely, my breathing started to come back, and it took about 40 to 45 minutes before the laboured breathing stopped, and I could breathe anywhere near what I considered semi-normal. The ambulance was still nowhere in sight and wasn't likely to be, so my daughter's partner took me down to the hospital. And it was isolation procedures whereby they had a limited amount of seats in the room. I wasn't prepared for the cold, so I stood outside in a T-shirt and jeans, standing outside in a queue for A&E to get in until I could get seen.
Wow.
And that was about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and I got seen around about 9 o'clock at night. And they suspected it was COPD. And I had a telephone interview with one of the or telephone consultation with one of the doctors who also suspected it was COPD. as we know, COPD can't be sort of diagnosed over the phone or even with a chest X-ray. It requires lung function tests and everything else. So they sent me away with a salbutamol inhaler and a peak flow meter to check my breathing to see what it was. And with the peak flow meter, I was lucky if I could register to 250, whereas the normal adult is 400 to 700. So my breathing was absolutely atrocious at the time. I had stopped smoking 10 months before I was diagnosed. So it wasn't a case of I've got COPD, I better stop smoking. The reason I stopped smoking was because of sleep deprivation. My coughing, wheezing, and disgusting mucus and everything else was.
Lovely.
Sorry, didn't mean to elaborate. No pictures.
I think the technical term is a productive cough.
Right. I'll remember that for next time. Thank you.
Yeah.
So my chest was rattling, my throat was wheezing and whistling and everything else, and I never got any more than 30 to 60 minutes sleep a night. I was going around with black rings under my eyes, and at the time I was driving, and it was just ridiculous. So on the 20th of January 2020, I just decided that's it. I had 100 cigarettes in the house, and I just stopped and never touched another one again. And then found out later on down the line we got this.
I was just going to say, actually, just for people listening in, COPD, we're talking about it. It is the full term, if you like, is chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. And as it sounds, it's chronic, as in it's long term. It's normally what we call irreversible, in that it's not necessarily curable, although it is manageable. And obstructive means that there's obstruction, within the airways. It tends to be a combination of chronic bronchitis and emphysema, and probably the most common cause is smoking. There are other causes, but it's the most common one. And there's believed to be a sort of genetic disposition as well. So that's linked in there. But everything that you've just said are the typical signs and symptoms. But for a lot of people, they could be signs and symptoms of a cold or a cough or just a general dicky chest and that sort of thing. So it's not always something that makes you go to the doctor and say, look, I've got all this happening. But in your case, obviously, you had the existing symptoms, and then all of a sudden it peaked, which is when you got the diagnosis. So what sort of impact was it having on your everyday life?
Basically, I don't believe, well, obviously, in hindsight, you'd see what sort of impact it was having. There used to be an advert on TV where an old man was mowing the grass, and he used to stop and puff his cheeks out and his little grandson would take the mickey out of him. Well, my grandson did the same as me on the way to school. He ran down the road, then bent down and put his hands on his knees. And I said, "What are you doing?" He says, "I'm getting my breath back, Grandad." And he was only 3. So, in reality, I presume that basically, in hindsight, that my breathing and general breathing was pretty bad. But as it's a gradual deterioration, you don't notice just how bad you've got, I don't think. So that was where I ended up at. That's it.
So what sort of exercise activity were you doing before you were diagnosed, or around the time? 'Cause you did mention that you weren't doing much and you put on quite a lot of weight, but were you doing any exercise or activity? Or
I was doing absolutely none. At the start of the pandemic, my wife's got health issues. She's got a pacemaker. And there was deep concern. She had a number of medical conditions that COVID would have maybe killed her. So she was shielded, and I didn't go out unless I absolutely had to. And no matter how careful you are, when you're sitting around 2 yards away from your kitchen throughout the pandemic, then food becomes a national hobby as opposed to sort of something that you need just to sustain you.
Yeah.
So I was eating the wrong sort of food, too much of the food, and going out once a week and shopping. And I put on about 2.5 stone. When I was diagnosed with COPD, I automatically started walking from day one, 6 miles a day.
Wow.
And apart from, I had a salbutamol inhaler. That was the only inhaler I had at the time. And to start with any hill whatsoever, when I got to the top, I presume my COPD, which has never been explained to me, is more bronchitis based than emphysema, because I tend to get more coughing fits than I
Yeah.
do shortness of breath. And so I started doing that. And if I got to the top of a hill, I'd maybe go into a fit of coughing. I'd have to take my salbutamol and then do that. I quickly learned that it's easier to take your salbutamol before you go and do exercise, because when you're distressed, you can't actually take the inhaler. You can't breathe properly to inhale it. So I started doing that, and then I started doing that 6 miles a day, and I walked that 6 miles a day for over a year, constantly trying to find some sort of walking club. But all the walking clubs were like ramblers that it
Yeah.
was the same as going shopping with your mum, where you go for a little walk around the store a little bimble at 2 mile an hour. Whereas
Yeah.
I was trying to increase my cardio and trying to improve things. And
I mean, I will just say, you're saying about taking the inhaler before you exercise. Obviously, that's something that anybody who's listening would need to discuss with their medical professional, because there may or may not be reasons for doing that. But, I mean, you're saying you were doing absolutely no exercise and then suddenly you're doing 6 miles a day. I mean, that's not going to be possible for a lot of people, depending on the severity of the condition. Obviously, early stages, people can manage to do a lot more. Do you feel it's important to kind of start where you are, to start with what you can do and build on that gradually?
I've always advocated that basically the COPD has four sort of what are known stages. And stage 1 or 2 is where you've got a fairly normal lifestyle. Once you get to 3 or 4, then your mobility, activity does become limited, and depending upon how it's affected you, can be very limited. But stage 1 and 2, even with that, they're still individual. The COPD term is an umbrella term that covers a multitude of
Yes.
things. And there's no rhyme or reason as to how COPD affects each individual. One person can be diagnosed as mild but still have still struggle to do exercise for any period of time. So you have to tailor each thing individually to you. There's no way of turning around just because you're stage 1 and saying, well, you're only stage 1, you can go and do this. Well, you can't. It's general age, fitness and everything.
And this is something, I mean, anybody knows me, anyone who listens in regularly or does any of my courses will know that, my big things are get to know your client holistically, not just as the condition that they've come to see you about, but also start where they are. Start with what people can do now and build on that, because that's going to promote a lot more confidence. So people say, right, okay, I did that. Even if it was 10 minutes or 5 minutes, they go away thinking, I did that, I can do this. Then it's going to promote much more confidence than giving them a lot more. And they go away thinking, well, I had to give up. I had to stop because I wasn't capable. So for me, it's always start where you are, whether it's a 6 mile walk or a 6 meter walk. It's doing what you feel you can do. And like you say, COPD, it is an umbrella term for a range of things, and people can be affected very, very differently. Like you say, somebody with stage 1 might actually be quite limited in what they can do, whereas somebody stage 2 can be able to do an awful lot more. So it's very individual. And this is where I think any fitness peeps listening in, always, work out exactly what your client's capable of doing at the start, because that's really going to help you to put something together that helps them, but also builds their confidence in doing other things.
I have to just add to what you're. Sorry, I just have to just add to what you're saying. That has to work both ways.
Yeah.
Don't go to a health professional or anybody else and sit there and say nothing. If you've got any concerns, please tell them what your concerns are. Ask them. They're the professional. They will help you. If you sit there quiet and don't say nothing, then they've got nothing to guide you, nothing to help you get on your journey.
That's it. And I think, some of the things that I've had people say is I'm actually really nervous about exercising or being more active because I'm worried I won't be able to breathe properly. I'm worried I won't be able to catch my breath. And quite often that might not happen. But if I know that somebody's worried about that, then where I start them will be a lot lower, because I want them to go away thinking, right, okay, they're not pushing me. They're letting me take it at my own pace. They're letting me get to a point where I'm comfortable, but I don't want to go any further. And I think you're right, it is a two-way thing, but it's, it's so important that people say, I'm nervous about doing this. I struggle with this. I don't want to do that. It's one of my big bugbears is people sort of saying, oh yeah, but this is going to be really good for you. And people are like, but I don't want to do that. It's not going to be good for you if you don't do it, is it? And it does frustrate me. It does frustrate me. But, I think this is what you're so right. It's a two-way conversation. We need to be getting to know each other because it will make a big, big difference. So you started off with these 6 mile walks then. So what sort of things are you doing now?
Well, the 6 mile walks became a bit time consuming, albeit I'm a retired person and sort of should have all the luxury of sitting around on my backside doing nothing whenever I feel like it. I'm a full-time granddad. I've got two young children that I adore. They're my 2 best mates in the world. So I see them quite regularly. And because of the pandemic, I started losing the will to get up in the morning. It was sit around in your bathrobe till 10:30, get some cereal and then get up, go and get washed and then come down and have lunch. So I thought that as the pandemic drew to an end, I said right to my daughter, I says, I'll take the boys to school every day. So the older one loves walking. He asked to go the long way to school. The younger one, not so much so. So I used to walk the older one to school and then come back and drive the younger one to school afterwards.
Right.
And that gave me a reason to get up every morning. I was up and out by 8 o'clock in the morning. So that was the start of that. As soon as I'd done that, then I'd go on my 6 mile walk. And I had a number of routes. And as time went by, I found that I no longer needed the salbutamol. My breathing recovery, albeit that my lung capacity can't improve, my breathing recovery today is substantially better. I can't put a figure on it, but it's substantially better. All I know is that I can do harsh cardio exercise, and it doesn't usually take me any longer than a minute to fully recover my heart rate, and that below 100. I've just been up at 167 while I'm doing harsh exercise.
Right.
My BP is really good for my age. It's 126/73, and my heart rate's 55 resting. So I'm quite happy with where I'm at. I started doing that, and I found that 6 miles was too much, so I started doing 4 7-mile walks a week. Obviously, that cut my mileage down, but it gave me 3 days off a week, technically, to go and do other things. And I lost track of time for somewhere down the line, but in January this year, I joined a gym, and it's an electronic resistance gym. It's I-35, and it takes 35 minutes to go around the equipment for two circuits. And it's got a cross trainer, elliptical cross trainer, exercise bike, seated rowing, the legs for calves and quads, presses, abs, and everything else. So I joined that, and I go there 3 times a week. The gym caters for people. They say it's a gym for non-gym people, people from the age of 20, and the oldest member I've seen there is 92.
Wow, that's always good.
And she's unbelievable. I mean, it takes her as long to get off the bike as it does to do the exercise while she's on it. But she turns up there, fair play to her, and she does it. So that's really good. So then I started my own. I joined a running club before that. So I was joining. I found via someone on our local community page who knew of a club in Basildon that did walking as well as running. And because I couldn't find nothing local, that's 5 miles away. So I got in touch with the person. They said, come across. So on Tuesdays and Thursdays, I started going for my normal walks in the morning, 7 miles, and then going and doing a 3 mile walk in the evening time over at Basildon with the walking club and running club.
Did you find that kind of social element of it, walking with other people, was helpful?
Absolutely. Albeit I'm quite motivated, it was hard work. It took a lot of motivation for me to get up every day and say, I'm going out to do this. Rain, hail or snow, I was out there every single day. It didn't matter whether I found one of my walks was 7.6 miles and the other one was just over 7 So I was going out for 2 hours on my own in the rain, hail and snow, or whatever temperature it was, doing my walk. Then I was going over there and doing that with them. So, but the social aspect took over with that, and it was quite pleasurable to go out and do that 3 mile walk. But the 3 miles with them on a Tuesday and Thursday night wouldn't have been enough. So I had to find something to supplement that and keep doing my part away from it as well. When it got to the end of the summer season last year, which would have been about September last year. Yeah, that's September last year. They asked me about run walking. I says, don't be silly. I says, I'm a COPD man. I can't run. They said, no, interval running. You run for 30 seconds, then you walk for a minute. I went, still very concerned. I thought, no, this is a bridge too far, albeit that I'm quite keen to try anything. And they said, you just run slow. And their version of slow and my version of slow were two entirely different things.
Yeah.
Because I thought I was running slow in the broad scheme of things, but apparently I was running very fast. So so I did 30 seconds and walked for a minute, 30 seconds, walked for a minute, 30 seconds. And when it got to the third minute, I was on my knees and bent over double in the gutter, thinking, sorry, I can't do this. But they don't leave anyone behind because it's an organised walk. So what they did was after that, you actually walk or until you can either carry on doing it or you just walk round to the end. And what the people are doing that are doing the run walk, they run off and then walk back to you until you go around, and the route's adjusted to the hour's time limit. So you're doing that sort of, you're actually doing that. As time progressed, I managed to do it quite comfortably. I can go out now. I find 30 seconds running and 60 seconds walking quite easy. We went out last night with them. I did the gym and the walk yesterday morning, and we did 4.28 miles last night in an hour, just over an hour, doing run walking, 30, 60. I've joined a second running club because I want more events. So I need more sort of social activity and things to try and push myself. So I've joined another running club called Pitsy Running Club, and on a Wednesday night they do an hour's running, but they do 60 seconds running and 60 seconds walking, which is a huge step. That extra 30 seconds is a killer, but I do need the 60 seconds to recover my breathing. I went out and done that, and then I had a hernia operation. And the hernia operation, I took a backward step. I didn't want to go on an endorphin downer, so I sort of weaned myself off, had the operation, and I was really careful, even though the skin healed up quick. I didn't want to pull any stitches or do anything. They said that slow running and walking was okay. So I did a 5K race after the week, 4 days after I had the operation.
Oh, wow.
But I took my time. Well, it took me 40 minutes to do that. But then after that, I've taken it really easy. And at the gym, I knocked out anything that may hurt my abs, like like any strength exercises or abdominals, things that may hurt my stomach. I want to give it at least 6 weeks. I went by my daughter's sort of timing, where she had a cesarean. They told her it took at least 6 weeks. So I thought, well, a little hernia, if I give that 6 weeks, that should be all right as well.
Yeah, so, I mean, there's some good advice you can get,
Yeah, I've done that, and then I've now started. I was doing like 4 or 5 days a week. I went out with there's a fellow over in Pitsy Running Club. He's 75, and he actually leads the run. And we do hill training, and we're talking steep uphill roads, steep uphill tracks in hills and everything else. Like you look at it, it's the sort of thing you think, I need crampons to get up here. I don't need running shoes. And I went out and done a 10 3/4 mile run with him the 2 days before my operation. So that was running for 60, walk for 60, run 60, walk for 60. Yeah. So that's how I've increased my fitness along the way. And I sort of cater for my breathing with my running pace and what I can physically do. And I have pushed extremely hard. But because of the operation and everything else, I pushed that all the way forward. And I've never done any more than a 5K race. Then last Sunday week, I went out and did the Chelmsford Half Marathon.
Oh, wow. Did you?
Yeah. And it's the first half marathon I've ever done. And after a mile and a half or 2.5 miles, I thought I'm not going to be able to do this because you get carried along at the start. You don't choose your pace. Everyone sort of jostles you along and you go fast as you want to, but longer than you have to. But I walked for a mile and a half after that, knowing that it's a 13.1 mile race. And I actually, after about a mile and a half, I was settled down, I was everything else. So I started going into my 30-60 after that and kept going that all the way around. And I managed my 30-60 for the whole of the race. And I finished in 3 hours and 2 minutes, and I was over the moon with that for a first
Brilliant. They do say, don't they, with any long distance running, that your mind will give up 11 times before your body's actually ready to give up, which is where it's so important just to keep going. She says, as somebody who's only ever done 1.5, well, I do. I've walked a lot further than 5K. I walk a lot, but I actually did a 5K race, first one ever last May, which I was really chuffed about. It was in Denver as well, so you've got the altitude to cope with there as well. Now, obviously, there's going to be people here listening thinking, there's just no way I can barely walk to the fridge and back because of my COPD. It's really bad. So obviously you've taken the attitude that you've started where you were, you pushed it, and you're somebody who can motivate by really having these targets and doing things. What would be your advice to somebody who is maybe stage 3 or stage 4 or struggling with any of the stages, who just sits there, I can't do anything? How do I start? Where do I start?
You have to start at the very beginning, which is obviously an old phrase, an old adage, but basically anything is better than nothing. And I'll say now, no matter what I've said I do on here, I don't expect anybody to do near what I do unless they want to do what I do. The idea is, and I've said this before over and over again, is do what you can while you still can. And if that's only walking from your couch to the front door, walk from your couch to the front door, but don't do it once. Go back and sit down, recover fully. Don't try and push yourself, recover fully. Go back to the front door again. If you can walk to the end of the drive and back again, walk to the end of the drive and back again. But don't try and do 10 walks to the drive in half an hour. Do it over the whole day. If you can walk a mile and you're struggling with a mile, do half a mile in the morning and half a mile in the evening. And put it in bite-sized chunks.
It's all about what you feel confident doing, isn't it, initially? Because I think most of us probably can do more than we're confident doing, but we need to build that confidence. And particularly with something like a breathing condition, a pulmonary condition, anything to do with that, people get very, very nervous about maybe getting a certain distance away and not being able to get back. So I think this is where, if whatever you think you can do that, because it's so important to build the confidence as well as the fitness. It's so important, isn't it, for that confidence to be there, that sense of, okay, I can walk to my front door, so that's what I'll do. I can walk to the end of my garden, that's what I'll do. I can walk to the end of the drive or to the house next door. And it's just building on that and walking there, walking back and going, okay, I did that. Now I'm going to recover. I'll do it again later. And I think this is something that people think if they can't do half an hour or an hour of activity, there's no point. But actually, like you said, anything is better than nothing. So at the moment you do nothing, 1 minute is a benefit. 2 minutes is a benefit. And that will turn into 3 minutes, 4 minutes.
Yeah, if you can do some cardio, that's great because that will help your breathing. It'll make what good lung you've got work harder and more effective. But don't forget about the rest of the body. Even if it's only going and getting a couple of tins out the cupboard, just bend your arms up and down and keep the top half muscles toned as well. Just do a little bit. And if you're worried about going too far away from your house, because my wife had surgery after she had her back done, and she was really worried about going away. We were quite fortunate we could afford a treadmill, so she could walk on the treadmill and just set up and sit down. But if you haven't got the luxury of a treadmill, break it down. Go for short walks or go laps close to your front door. Don't
Yeah,
go too far away. Stay close to your front door so that if ever you get any problems, identify where there's a wall that you can sit down or anything
yeah.
else and keep some means of communication to call somebody else if you're getting any difficulties.
That's it. And I know, particularly with respiratory conditions, pulmonary conditions, the leg muscles often do get quite weak quite quickly because we're not using them. So I think as well as thinking about cardiovascular stuff, think about, every time you sit down or stand up, do it once or twice more just to start building that strength back up again. And if, there is a lot of support out there. There is a lot of information out there, but it is so important, that you don't feel pressured into doing more than you're comfortable with, particularly at first, because if all you can do is stand up, sit down, stand up and sit down, and that's enough, that's still more than you were doing before, and that's the improvement. If you then build up to doing it 3 times or 4 times, or like you say, putting your tins in the cupboard, it all helps. And it's not necessarily about exercising as such for some people, is it? It's just about moving and being confident in the movement.
A cheap form of exercise is resistance bands.
Yeah, I love a band.
They're not overly expensive. There's a number of different exercises on the internet that you can look at, and they're great just so you can take the easiest one to do and just do it. If it means bending your arm up and down, pulling on an elastic band, it'll do you the world of good. If you've got to push out with your leg, it'll do you the world of good. What
I'll do is I will find a reputable site and put the link in to the podcast information, because I think, like I say, if you haven't got a resistance band, all the ladies out there, a good pair of tights will do initially, just to give you a little bit of that resistance.
I use my tights as well.
Yeah. But, like I say, I think the most important thing here is do something, however small it seems to you. That, a lot of people think, and like I said, if I can't do a workout, there's no point. But actually sitting down and standing up once more than you've done, walking to your front door and back, if that's more than you were doing before, that's going to give you some benefit, because it will, like I say, it'll improve confidence. And over time, you will start to feel the benefits and be able to do more and be confident doing more. And again, it's think about what you want to be able to do. You might not be like Steve here, who wants to, do a half marathon, but you might just want to be able to do half an hour of gardening in the spring, or do your own housework. Although I never understand when people say my goal is to get back to doing my own housework. If you've got someone else doing it, then let them. But you know what I mean? You might just yeah. You might just want to, just like walk to your friend's house, which is in the next street, and back again. This isn't about running or going to the gym, it's about what works for you. It's about finding that little motivation. Oh, I'd love to be able to go for coffee with my friends, but at the moment I'm not confident about walking there and walking back. And that might be that you say, right, I'm going to walk to the coffee shop, meet my friends, and then one of them will drive me home. Start like that. Start with simple things, because it is a use it or lose it situation, isn't it? And particularly with something like COPD, if you're doing nothing, it can deteriorate much more rapidly than if you keep yourself going. Obviously, with asked advice from any medical professionals that you work with, because, they will be able to advise you on what not to do as much as anything. Don't overexert yourself. But this is where I think it's so important, isn't it, to just sort of think, okay, what one tiny thing can I do today just to move a little bit more?
Yeah, and with regard to that, I mean, I smoked for 50 years and I was a mess afterwards. But you'd be amazed within a very short space of time. I don't put time limits on it, because what works for me doesn't necessarily work for everybody else. But the benefits that you get when you stop are absolutely amazing. The body is so resilient, and just give it a chance. And all I say to anyone is, if you're contemplating stopping smoking, remember one thing: you only ever stop smoking once. All the practice runs don't count. You only stop once, and that's forever.
exactly. And it is, it's not easy. I will say that it's not easy, but it's worth it because it really helps with, particularly if you have something like asthma or COPD or, even bronchitis. I say even bronchitis, that can be quite serious. But any kind of lung issue, it will really, really help you. And like you say, that there's no, in 6 months you'll feel this, and in a year you'll feel that, but you will start to notice you can do more. Everyday tasks become a little bit easier. So it is definitely something that it's worth looking into. And there's a lot of support out there as well, motivational as well. Just one last thing. Just did you find that kind of creating more of a habit of going for a walk, instead of saying, I'll go for a walk at some point, saying I'm going to go for a walk at this time or at this time, helped?
There was two motivating factors. The first, I stopped smoking, which was that. Then when I was diagnosed, I went for a walk and I went on a calorie-controlled diet as well. So from the October to February, I lost 2.5 stone in 4 months.
Wow.
And that was geared around exercise and calorie-controlled diets until I got back to that. And then the big shocker for me, another milestone, was being diagnosed with COPD, which in anybody's language to me was a terminal illness. Anything that I'm not going to get better from is a terminal illness. So I'm now fighting to survive. So my exercise regime is for me, my family, and in particular my grandsons. I've already got it earmarked. I want to see my 6-year-old grandson's 10th birthday. Once I see his 10th birthday, if I should be that lucky, then I want to see his 15th birthday. And I work on a day-to-day basis. But I will do everything humanly possible in my power to exercise my way out of this. I know I can't reverse it. I've got no one to blame. I did the damage. But I am working extremely hard to keep on top of this. And if you can stabilise it, you're doing extremely well. And if you can slow it down, you're still doing well. But there's still no guarantees. So you have to do everything in your power to try and control it.
And I think that is an amazing point to finish on. It's just because it's incurable doesn't mean it's terminal, if you like. But equally, it does mean that you need to be managing it yourself. You need to be doing what you can to slow down any deterioration or any issues. And like you say, there's no guarantees, but I get the feeling you'll be there for your grandson's 15th. Where can people find you if they just want to find out a little bit? Because I know you do support people through becoming more active with COPD. So where can they find you?
Yeah, I mean, I've been trying since I was diagnosed. Like I say, I regard myself as extremely fortunate that I can do what I can do. And my current Twitter page is COPD Rehab Guy, and my Facebook page is COPD Rehab Guy. I haven't got all the answers. I've got a good following on Twitter at the moment, and if I don't know the answer, I will get the correct answer from a health professional. And if you want the encouragement or just to chat about what way you want to start or how you want to approach maybe getting into a more active lifestyle, I'm always here to chat. If you're worried about putting it on the Facebook page, you can DM me on Twitter or PM me on Facebook. I'll always chat to you privately.
Steve, it's been absolutely brilliant talking to you, and it is really inspirational to hear how, a diagnosis is something long term has kind of turned your life around, and long may it continue.
And thank you very much for having me on here.
Well, thank you. You've been listening to me, Sarah Bolitho, on Creating Active Lives with my guest this week, Steve Bowen, and I will pop his details into the information so that if you do want to get in touch with him, you can. Thank you all for listening, and we will see you again soon. Thank you for listening to Creating Active Lives with me, Sarah Bolitho, and my guests. Join me each week for more on how to create and sustain everyday activity, and follow me online at Fitness Career Mentor or Fabulous if you're interested in career development and more on creating active lifestyles.